Hello, good evening. It's a privilege to welcome one of the most influential immunologists in modern history, Professor Peter Doherty. Professor Doherty is an Australian veterinarian, scientist, author, and recipient of the 1996 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Alongside Rolf Zinkernagel, he discovered how T cells recognize virus-infected cells through major histocompatibility complex, or MHC molecules, a finding that transformed our understanding of the immune system and laid the foundation for advances in infectious disease, transplantation, vaccine development, autoimmunity, and cancer immunotherapy. Born in Brisbane, Australia, Professor Doherty initially trained as a veterinarian before pursuing a career in research, bringing a uniquely broad biological perspective to the study of disease. Over the decades, he's held appointments across Australia and the United States, published extensively on immunology and public health, and became one of the world's most respected scientific communicators. Today, he serves as Laureate Professor Emeritus at the University of Melbourne, and the Peter Doherty Institute for Infection and Immunity stands as a testament to his enduring impact on biomedical science. Professor Doherty, thank you so much for joining us. It is an honor to have you on Cutting to the Case.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to talk.
Absolutely, and what an honor. I wanted to start out with the question on everyone's minds, which is how does your veterinary background inform your study of disease?
The veterinary background is, pretty much like the medical background in a sense. We do the medicine of every other vertebrate species. So it's an enormous spectrum. So there are differences, especially the time I trained in veterinary medicine, where it was very much concerned with large animal production systems. I was growing up in the northern state of Queensland, which is, we're upside down in Australia, so it's the hottest part of the country. And it's kind of bigger than Texas. Well, a lot of things are bigger than Texas, quite frankly. And at that stage, sheep and cattle were a major part of the economic system. So we were trained both in medicine and in a kind of ecological environmental approach to medicine and to animal production. Well, the consequence of that is the veterinary world focused a lot more on younger animals. Now, of course, there's a much more of a focus on the particularly companion animals in a medical sense, but it was really and infection was a big part of that. I think vets were actually better trained in infectious disease than medics because the medics didn't have enough time. They were covering geriatrics and all sorts of things that the vets didn't care about much back then. And we're very well trained in infectious disease and pathology. And I've always thought of the human body as a kind of set of linked ecosystems, linked mutually dependent ecosystems. That's conditioned my thinking all through and how I've thought about how say, an infection works. And an infection is enormously complex. We're interfacing a new genome, the genome of the pathogen, with the genome of us. And the complexity there is massive. So I'm interested in complexity and it wasn't hard to make a transition. I did veterinary research for 10 years before I became involved in medical research.
Yes, yes. And I believe this is coming together quite nicely for the audience, especially knowing about, the COVID-19 and all these infectious, things that can come from animals. I mean, it's incredible, really, how veterinary science interfaces with immunology. And thank you for sharing that perspective. You're talking about sitting with complexity. I'm curious, what is a scientific mystery that bothers you because it feels like we should already understand it by now?
Well, there are many mysteries. And the thing with being a discovery scientist, which is what I am, though I train in a very applied field, is basically every discovery opens up something new and opens up new paths.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very exciting. I'm enormously excited by data, by experiments. I'm a data-driven scientist. In fact, the complexity of the human organism or the vertebrate organism, because other vertebrates are as complex as we are, except in sense of brain function, perhaps. It's just that we're very good at being humans, and they're very good at being dogs, for instance. So things are a bit different in that respect. But I think the when I started in this, and when we made our discovery that won the Nobel Prize, which is now more than 50 years ago, we didn't even, the word cytokine hadn't been invented. We didn't know the word lymphokine. There was only one secreted factor we knew about, which was called macrophage inhibitory factor. So
Hmm.
we developed theoretical constructs, and we looked at science through a lens where a lot of it just wasn't even visible in any sense whatsoever. We couldn't even speculate about it. We did speculate about secreted factors, but had no real understanding. So I think it was extraordinary, actually, that due to the fact of our particular experimental system, we made some very good guesses and got them right.
Mhm.
And that's why we got the Nobel Prize. We really discovered how immunological surveillance works and what the what the transplant system's for. Nobody knew why we had a transplant system. Why would vertebrates that carry their fetus within their body have a system which could potentially reject them? So it was we did some rather simple experiments by today's terms, made some speculations, developed a theory, and we were lucky. It turned out to be right.
Yes, yes. Wow, that's really, really incredible. And that brings me to another question about these, you know, why would why is such a huge question that you've grappled with as a discovery scientist instead of an applied scientist. What discovery do you think is sitting in front of us today that future scientists will wonder how we all missed?
Well, a lot of the discovery process at the moment is driven by product availability, by an understanding, and by analyzing broadly with for instance, genomics, phenomics, proteomics, and all the rest of it. So
Mhm.
we're kind of driving a process of discovery by getting enormous data sets and then interrogating them. AI is going to be a help with that, obviously, and we're going to get more and more rapid advances. It's it's not so at the moment. Science is not so conceptually driven. When you don't have many tools, theory and concept, or not so much theory in the sense of grand theories as the physicists have. That hasn't really worked in biology very well. There's the theory of evolution, which is the one that's central to all biology. If you don't look at biology through the lens of evolution, it makes no sense whatsoever. But we don't have that grand. We don't have a separate category of theoreticians and experimentalists. We're data driven. So the data sets now are simply enormous, and dealing with those, of course, can be problematic. But there are big questions out there still. For instance, the immune system. The immune system has no central processing unit like the brain does. The brain is the central processing unit for the nervous system, if you like. The,
Mhm.
the immune system has nothing like that. It has no hardwired connection. It's a disseminated system. The cells move around the body. They move in and out of tissues. They're in blood. They're in lymph nodes. We don't even know how big the immune system is at any one time.
Yeah.
And so, and one of the big questions in my mind is, how does the immune system count?
Hmm.
How do we keep these relative proportions of different types of cells that are important in your diagnostic repertoire? How do we keep them so relatively constant? And how is that determined? And perhaps if I was better at mathematics, I'd have a better understanding of that. But I can never get any of my mathematical friends to take much interest in modeling it. They prefer other questions.
Yes, yes. You're very humble as well, I must say. Yeah,
That's
that's something
That's
I
a bit the Australian personality. It's a country that was founded by convicts, basically. So,
oh, yes, yes. Um, Certainly. Yeah, I hadn't ever given that much thought, to be honest. I mean, that's just what we're told to memorize essentially. Like
Well,
this
we're
many percentage of nutrition.
celebrating 250 years of the American Revolution, right? I mean, Australia was founded because the British had, when they lost the American colonies,
Hmm.
the British had nowhere to send their human trash. I mean, they had increasing numbers of prisoners sitting around on rotting old ships, prison hulks in Portsmouth and in the Thames. They had to have somewhere to send them, so they decided to settle Australia, where James Cook and Joseph Banks and so forth had actually mapped the East Coast really quite frequently. In 1770, 1788, the first Australian settlement, it was a set of convict ships loaded with prisoners and soldiers.
We are absolutely the rebels, and carry that idea of rebellious innovation into science as well, I'm sure. Yes.
Well, a lot of the rebels came from the Irish, but a lot of the English who were transported here were petty criminals. In fact, we've just found a record of an ancestor who stole some ducks and some geese, was imprisoned on a prison hulk, never made it to Australia because he died of an infection.
Oh, wait, an ancestor of yours?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh
It's
my goodness.
remarkable what you can find now through the web.
Okay, okay. Well, yeah, that's incredibly fascinating, and thank you for sharing all this. It is quite interesting how much how many similarities there are between Australia and the United States, and the fact of that matter being, we've thrown away the conservative values of tradition and practice, and we've really gone forward and built. I mean, in Australia, we have the Doherty Institute and all this amazing University of Melbourne. In America, we have Harvard, MIT. It's really this collective spirit of rebellion against the status quo.
Well, I mean, the US is still, even with current problems, is still the leading scientific nation. Whether that will continue or not depends on how policies evolve over the next few years. But I mean, there are institutions like MIT, Harvard, many great institutions in the United States, including St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, where I worked in Memphis. Fantastic, fantastic wealth, fantastic resources,
Mhm.
fantastic generosity from the community. The philanthropy in the United States is a major factor in the medical research area. But of course, you can only really have top level medical research with the costs involved if you have appropriate support from government. And of course, that's under challenge a bit in the United States at the moment.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
But
And
still, never underestimate the innovative and creative capacity of the USA. I mean, you just have all through this fantastic people are working and developing various new possibilities, if you like.
absolutely. And it's a global effort as well.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is. I mean, well, all scientists are globalists, basically. We're internationalists.
Yes.
Science is international. Infectious disease, pandemics are not local. Climate change is not local. It's everything. In fact, it was the statement by the Rockefeller Institute and now Rockefeller University microbiologist René Dubos. Um, think globally, act locally.
Mm.
We are not separate from the rest of the world. We're all part of the same planet, part of the same world. And you can see that from space. And every astronaut comes back with that conviction.
Mhm. You don't see borders from space.
No, and borders are artificial. I mean, part of the problem in the Middle East is so many borders were drawn artificially by the British and French to protect their self-interest in the early part of the 20th century. And it was all about oil.
Yes.
Nothing much has changed.
Now, the one thing you can see is the North Korean border, but um,
Yes, yes, well, that's another tragedy, quite frankly.
yes, yes. So,
Well, I
so
mean, South Korea is so extraordinary, so innovative, and so dynamic, and then you've got the North.
yes, yes. So, really, with all of this innovation, I wanted to bring this back to your field as well. With all of this growth, do you really think that we're closer to understanding immunity, or have we simply become more aware of how complicated it truly is?
We're certainly aware of how complicated it is, and there is other complexities. I mean, interactive effects are really very difficult to get to. There's there are, I think we are making rapid advances. I think we'll see much more rapid advances with many more rapid advances with cancer. I mean, immunology, when I went to work at St Jude Children's Hospital, which is a cancer hospital predominantly, though it's always had strong virus programs, for instance. They really weren't interested in me coming in as head of immunology, building a cancer immunology group because cancer immunology didn't go anywhere. And the oncologists thought it was just basically uninteresting and a waste of their time. And now, of course, oncology is very much dominated by immunological therapies and solutions. Some enormously expensive, which brings in big problems for national health systems, for example. So yes, the immunology it is probably the most complex of all the areas. That and the brain, of course, which at least the brain's hardwired and it stays in the same place.
Yes, yes. Immunology is incredibly complex because it's both, solid tumor, I mean, in terms of cancer immunology and just hematologic. I mean, it's just incredible. This now that you mentioned the brain, I'm very curious. Had you not gone into immunology, what other field would you have pursued?
Well, when I was living, I did my PhD in a veterinary institution
Mhm.
in Edinburgh called the Morden Research Institute, and I did it through the University of Edinburgh, which is, by the way, the oldest university medical school in the English-speaking world.
Wow.
Uh, and because the London ones were all hospital based, basically. So basically, I was working as a neuropathologist, a veterinary neuropathologist. I was a member of the British Neuropathology Society and the international one. I had a lot of contact with multiple sclerosis researchers and so forth from the big neurological institute in London, Queen Square. And I was fascinated by the brain. I could have easily gone down the neuroscience road. And the reason I went down the immunological road is because we made a big discovery and quite unexpectedly, and that took me down into the area of what's the CD8 T cell or the killer T cell, as we then knew it doing, and how does it work and so forth. And that was enormously satisfying. I think if I was starting again at this stage, I'd probably go the neuroscience road. But maybe the psychiatric road, because basically, in some things, human beings are absolutely nuts.
It's incredible how complex they are. Yes.
I, I mean, the craziness of some of what's happening now is almost beyond belief.
Yes, yes. And it would really help shine a light on the current, zeitgeist of America and, what is happening psychiatrically with America. All of these questions of scientific trust
You've
and
got your challenge there. I
certainly,
don't know. Are
certainly.
you going down? Are you thinking of going into neurology or
I'm actually thinking
psychiatry?
about psychiatry and my mother is a neurologist and my dad is a neuro-ophthalmic pathologist. So, you know,
Yeah.
there, there we
I,
go.
I'd be, I think so. Human behavior is fascinating and what drives it, and clearly it's very much manipulated at the moment.
Mhm.
My younger son's a neurologist. He's actually in Seattle at Swedish Hospital. It's
Wow.
I'm fascinated by the brain. I mean, if you take it, the brain and the immune system are the two great systems for dealing with external stimuli and diversity, and they both work with diversity. They do it in very different ways, and the immune system is subconscious, but so are elements of the nervous system, of course. So I've speculated about this and written about it, but really there's not that much in common. But neuroimmunology, which was a very blocked subject for quite a while, and I was involved in it for quite a while, is now going somewhere fairly quickly, I think. It's an interesting area. And
Yes.
neuroimmunology psychiatry maybe would.
And now that you're, discussing these Beautiful fields. One of my questions was also, what is the most beautiful idea in biology?
The most beautiful idea in biology is evolution. It's the central idea in biology is
Mhm.
evolution. Frankly, I mean, people find this hard to deal with because they like to think that things are designed rationally. And of course, we have the term genetic engineering. Actually, it's the most unfortunate term because a lot of some governments and companies went into the idea that, with the idea that you could engineer biology in the same way you engineer a building. Well, you engineer a building because you build it from ground up. I mean, you buy the products and you put them together. You have design. You can calculate various stresses. Everything is basically fairly straightforward and usually over-engineered. But you can't do that with biology, actually. You're intervening in a complex system and hoping that what you think will work will actually work. A good example is when tumor necrosis factor was first discovered,
Mhm.
everyone thought, well, this is the basis of systemic shock, which is a massive problem, continues to be a problem. And they tried sort of blocking TNF, no use, didn't do anything. But
Mhm.
then, of course, tumor necrosis factor or blocking it has been very useful for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. So you take what you can get. A lot of solutions in medicine aren't actually solutions. They're solutions at the level of clinical improvement
Mhm.
or stopping something happening, but they're not solutions that are taken through to a full understanding of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Because once you get a clinical solution, a medical solution, people stop pursuing it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes. And
Fair enough.
people stop pursuing it, and the questions of what people pursue and what people don't pursue is also a fascinating question of itself, and a burgeoning scientific discipline of its own. um, it's more of a meta approach, but I am very curious. Generally, have scientific careers become more or less meritocratic since you started?
Meritocratic. I think the criteria are often, I mean, some very successful scientists, I mean, they're smart people. Anyone who's a successful scientist is a smart person. But because of the nature of science at the moment, which means mobilizing often a fairly large group, some people who have, I think, more in the way of managerial expertise have become much more prominent. And they're like little factories, if you like. There's an interesting model in the Howard Hughes Institute, which funds a lot of terrific research in the United States and funds a lot of investigators in medical schools and so forth, but it also has its own institute in Genelia Farms, I think it's called, where the maximum lab size, I think, is 5 or 6. That's very unusual in modern science. It means that the head of the lab is still heavily involved in the science. Now, though, you'll commonly have operations 12, 15, 20 postdoctoral fellows, and not the kind of science I'm attracted to, quite frankly. I think it's a lot of uh, it's somewhat exploitative, quite frankly. I don't like it. Some American investigators, though, they will complain a lot about funding and so forth. I think they're actually overfunded, quite frankly, and run labs that are too big. There are complexities there and various problems.
Yes, yes. Um, it really does help to have a finger on the pulse of your own investigation. I think that's a lost art of the scientific community, especially as we get all of this H-index and um, uh, the arms race of academia that everyone talks about. I was wondering also if you could maybe shed some light on the current question of, how we evaluate scholarship at the highest levels through tenure tracks and through progression through academic stages for acceptance into PhD, postdoctorate fellowships. I mean, is the H-index the proper approach, or is there a better approach that you've seen emerging?
I think the H index is indicative of someone who's a successful scientist. I mean, they publish a lot of science, they publish in the right places, they're highly regarded. Obviously, they can stand up in front of a group of people and talk convincingly. Whether it actually identifies the most creative people is a very different matter. I suspect it does not. There's a whole lot of fashion in science. I mean, you will see there'll be a breakthrough somewhere. I think it was a swarm of bees. You know, there's a breakthrough here, and the bees all swarm over there, and then there's another breakthrough there. Bees all swarm over there. I never did that personally. I had certain questions that interested me about the immune system, and I just followed through and just followed through linearly on what interested me. As
Mhm.
a result of that, I went in and out of fashion. And so sometimes I'd be fashionable, sometimes no one was very interested in what I was doing. But I've never wanted to follow fashion or be part of some sort of self-congratulatory club. You know, there's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of smart people involved. You get all sorts of distortions when you get that mix.
Yes, yes. And I'm thinking also about what question do you find yourself thinking about more now than you did at age 40?
I'm not thinking about science a lot now. I'd
Mhm.
really like to. I'm much more interested in actually in the nervous system again, but I'm not. I'm not deluding myself into thinking I can do anything meaningful in that area. And so at the moment, I'm focusing on lay writing, writing for a broader audience about science and issues to do with science. I wrote a book, for instance, in 2015 called The Knowledge Wars. It actually wasn't published as a print book in the United States. It was a warts and all look at science, the history of science, how to read open access science, trying to talk to a lay audience and say how this is what it's about. The scientific paper is a very strange art form. You have to understand how it works when you read it. I talked about fraud. I talked about various distortions and so forth. And I wrote it from the point of view of an insider in medical science and an outsider in climate science, and sort of compared and contrasted the two areas. At the moment, I'm thinking of doing a revision of that book and sort of bringing it up to date. And I've got some other writing projects. So at the moment, my whole area, I'm 85 years old. I don't know how much intellectual clarity I've got left.
Oh, no.
And at the moment, I'm focused on writing for a general audience.
Mhm. Mhm. And uh, another question as well, since you're discussing this broad audience and you're speaking to an audience on this video podcast that's very broad, ranging from early career scientists to medical students and residents, what is a piece of advice that you'd encourage people to kind of pursue in at that early stage of their careers?
Right. Medical students and residents, I'm very clear on what advice I'd give is, well, work hard, but be a really good professional. Learn your profession, do it well. If, of course, if you want to go off into science, which some people do. I mean, I've got friends and they've been very good scientists who've never really gone very far with medicine. They've gone off into basic research labs, classically at the National Institutes of Health, for instance. Fine, if you're going to do that, do it. But if you're going to be out there in the medical world, be a good professional, be a good doctor. I
Mhm.
mean, firstly, that's what we ask of people. I mean, every medical student costs the community money. It's not, it doesn't come for free. And we ask of them, ask of the profession that they do a good job. And that's what you want to focus on first and foremost. Then, if you've got a research institute, you may interests, you may develop those in parallel. You may do one thing first and one thing later. I think having an interest in research is very gratifying. And because of modern technology, for instance, in immunology, we can do things in humans that we couldn't do before. I mean, human cellular immunology was difficult. It often required reasonably large numbers of cells, for instance. But now we can work with single cells. We can look at mRNA profiles in single cells straight out of a person's arm. We don't need many cells. We can work with a few cells that you get from a baby or from a young child or from an older person. And so I think the possibilities for working with the immune system in humans. And that's where there are many, many questions and are enormously improved. And working between whether a medical scientist or medically interested, qualified investigator who's seeing patients will want to do that themselves, or whether they'll work with basic scientists, really doesn't matter. Just work with competent people wherever they come from, and respect the data. Don't go into it. You go into it with a hypothesis. You go into it with an idea of what you'll find. But the worst thing that can happen to you if you're running a research lab is to have people in the research lab getting the results that they think you want. That's where fraud happens, actually. So you've got to be very open-minded. You've got to be smart, and you've got to look at the data.
Yes, yes. And I think, you know, what is so kind of more broadly from that as well, what's something biology has taught you about human nature that has nothing to do with cells, viruses, or the immune system?
Well, I mean, we about human nature, then we're getting into the world of psychiatry, aren't we? I mean, what do
The
we
psychology
mean when we
of
say
being a
what do
discovery
we mean when
scientist.
we say human nature? We mean human behavior.
The philosophy and guiding psychology of a discovery scientist.
Well, the discovery scientist is on the whole very focused and very narrowly focused. They
Mhm.
may shift their focus from time to time, but it's a very narrow focus because that's the way you get somewhere. And you're asking very defined questions. It is largely a reductionist exercise, but then you have to be very aware of that unusual result, that new possibility. And a lot of the judgment in science is because we are now faced with so many possibilities because of the nature of analytical systems, a lot of the judgment is in deciding which direction. Now, that's a team effort to some extent. If you've got a good research laboratory, I always think people say, well, you train so many people. Actually, they train me. I mean, it's bright young guys like you coming into a lab, which will largely determine a lot of what goes on, actually. Talking to other bright young people, talking to other bright young people that you know from some other context or from just socially about what they're doing, and they're building some bridges that actually go somewhere. So you've got to be very aware. You've got to respect people at
Mhm.
every level. You've also got to respect the fact that some people who try to do research and come into it and think they want to do it just don't really have what it takes to do that. So you need to make them realize that at some stage, because otherwise they're wasting their time. It's not a given. Not everyone who wants to do science is good at it.
Mhm.
But that's one of the reasons why I say if you're trained in medicine, be a good doctor. It's a wonderful life. I mean, it's hedged by bureaucracy and various limitations, but it's still a great life
It is. It
because
is.
it's a life of service. And that's what we as professionals should be about. We should be about service.
Yes. Service to humanity for you and service to each individual patient for us. Now,
That
I
doesn't
have,
mean you shouldn't make a good living, and that's fine. I mean, you should earn some money, but basically what we're there to do is to help and protect, serve and protect.
yes, yes. And, going back to the guiding philosophy behind scientists, I am very curious. How does a Nobel laureate recognize originality? So when you read a paper now, what makes you stop and think there might be something important here?
It often there's so much literature, and I'm not actively in this now. I'm sort of I've moved beyond it, and I leave it to my younger colleagues. But basically, it's often when you hear a talk actually at a meeting and so forth, because there's so much to read out there. It's when you hear someone actually stand up and say, "Well, this is what I think it means." This is often when you get excited about something, or a big result will come through, which is really pretty obvious and transformative.
Mhm.
But And so there are great studies. I mean, and some stand out. A lot of science, of course, is simply moving things incrementally forward, if it's moving it forward at all. Some of it actually moves it backwards because it adds confusion. There's often at the stage when a new discovery is made, everything looks very clear. And then there are various people that muddy the waters. Some that do it because there really is more complexity there than we have to consider. Some because they're just not very good scientists.
Yes, yes. It's a complicated environment to be in for
Yeah, but
sure.
if you think of the benefit to humanity, it's probably the best money spent
Yeah.
out there. In fact, in many ways.
Yes, absolutely. And, as a final question, because I do want to be respectful of your time as well, what is one final parting thought you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, enjoy your life. I mean, have a good life and have some sort of balance in life. I think people who work all the time get tired and they get narrowed. And I think you need other things in your life. You need well, family is important, but having a social life as well is important. Um, Stay off drugs and alcohol. I mean, that's a good idea, but you're going to do that anyway if you're a successful medical practitioner because you need clarity of mind. So basically, I mean, have a good life and enjoy it.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for that balanced perspective at the end as well. Um, yes, so thank you again for joining us. This is what an honor. You've inspired millions, billions of people. I mean, this is just incredible to be able to speak with you in person. Thank you for all that you've done.
But thank you and
Thank you.
and go well.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. And this is Cameron Sabat signing off.